the amazing Lucia Knight, who is author of this amazing book, this dynamite book, Exchange, which will remain with me on screen here for you to ponder on and look on the comments in the chat box to buy later on. So, Lucia, let's dive straight in. You bought this dynamite, or you authored this little dynamite little book, Exchange, How to Torch Your Work Treadmill, which is just so relevant to what we're talking about today, to the whole theme of today. Can you tell us, what do you do and why did you do this?
So I think the what is kind of easy. Here's my one-liner. I help professionals in their 40s and 50s stop wasting valuable time doing work that doesn't make them happy by designing work that does. So my sort of why is, it's really short. I truly believe that our lives will be too short to waste time doing work that isn't satisfying or fulfilling. So here's a really sort of shocking fact for me when I read it. In the UK, sorry for anyone who's overseas, but in the UK, the average percentage of time of waking hours that we spend either working or commuting to work is 60%. But if you commute more than half an hour each way, if you think about work at home, if you prepare for a big meeting tomorrow, or if you worry about work in the evening, that percentage just increases enormously. And that is a heck of a lot of time to be spending doing work that isn't satisfying or fulfilling.
Absolutely agreed. That figure is 60%. I was doing a quick mental calculation. I was in the employed world in commercial life for 40 years. So 60% of that is 24 years. So that's potentially 24 years of my life wasted on doing things that weren't satisfying. But career change is so tricky, isn't it? Especially if we're not 25. We'd all love to be 25 again, or maybe not. But even if we're not 25, it's tricky to do. So why have you chosen to focus on us oldies and us more mature human beings?
Mature, wonderful, mature people. So my former career, I was a headhunter, and I spent every living moment of the last 10 years interviewing finance directors or CFOs and trying to find them the right spot in the right company. And I worked out that I'd conducted 1,500 interviews with people predominantly in their 40s and 50s. These were senior managers in companies who were looking for something different. And over time, I'm not sure when I realized it, but over time it became more and more apparent to me that the problems that my generation, these people in their 40s and 50s were experiencing weren't isolated problems. They weren't individual problems. Swathes and swathes of my generation were feeling similar and experiencing similar problems. So the three problems, the major problems that made an impact on me, were that so many of these people were waking up and asking themselves this question, is this it? Yeah, so they've invested 20 years of their career, or 15 or 20 or 25 years of their career, but they're still waking up going, crikey, is this what I've spent those 20 years? Was it worth it, basically? And instead, lots of the people that I were interviewing were experiencing stress or burnout or redundancies or forced exits, or just experience, or maybe just being sidelined into a career cul-de-sac. And the second problem, that they were waking up with the reality that as they moved up their career, as they progressed, they became more expensive. And as they became more expensive, and I think a lot of this is experience it, we become more vulnerable. And that vulnerability was either in the room when I was having these interviews with individuals, or they could see it coming in the future. But the third problem that really clarified something for me was that most of these guys and girls didn't have the faintest idea of how to make tweaks or changes without upsetting the whole apple cart of life. And I guess the combination of those three problems meant that I came to a realization that I wanted to spend the rest of my second career helping people to answer those questions and figure out what their next moves were.
Brilliant. I love your phrase, upsetting the apple cart of life, because we just don't know how to do it, do we? How many of us have been, is this it? Waking up at 6:30 a.m. to catch the 7:15 train to be in the office on time so as to avoid the eye of the overseers. Amazing. So Lucia, your book, Exchange How to Torch Your Work Treadmill, oh, how we all want to do that, or did want to do that, is filled with stories of individuals who have changed careers successfully, in speech marks, after 40. But what, in your view, does successfully mean? I mean, are they all now billionaires or what?
They're definitely not all billionaires, but there are loads of books out there for people who want to be billionaires, loads of them. But I wanted to write something that was different, that was for people like me and all of those 1,500 people that I'd interviewed. So normal people who had normal careers and were normal professionals, but who wanted to be successful in a different way, who wanted to define their success differently. So, you know, so the individuals in the stories changed careers successfully, but in my definition of successfully, it was they were happier. So it's their version of happier. I don't think there is one version of happy. I think it's completely unique. So for instance, some of them made really small changes. And I think Anna talked about one of those changes that she's going through. So a small change. So I'll give you some examples. So Liz was a financial controller who tried to be a finance director, got to finance director level, hated every bloody minute of it, and decided that her version of happy was going to be being a present grandmother who looks after her kids once every 2 weeks, and having the flexibility of being a freelancer, a freelance financial controller, to be able to motorbike around Europe and tango dance in Buenos Aires. Now that sounds like a cool version of happiness, but there are loads of others. So Martine, she was a HR director who spent half of her life traveling around Europe and being away from her family. So she decided she also wanted to create her own HR consultancy with limited travel to be close to home to her teenagers for, you know, the time that she felt they needed them. But some people do dramatic and exciting changes, but each to their own. So I'll give you a couple of examples of those. Kate was a defense executive who became a gin maker and started a gin company with her best friend from home, investing almost nothing but their free time. She's now, their gin has been Gin of the Month in Harvey Nicks and Fortnum Mason's twice in 1 year. Anil was a major corporate healthcare exec. You know, he'd climbed every ladder of every company he'd ever touched. But he decided his version of happy work was joining a tiny biotech firm where he did everything and got his hands dirty all the time, and he loved it. Andrea was made redundant from a marketing career because her company relocated out of the country. So she used her redundancy money to spend 6 months in an experiment to see whether she could make enough money to pay her half of the family bills by writing. She's now produced 3 books, has a publisher, gets big advances, and is doing really well. But the other one, and this is the final one, is you, Ges. So Ges was in my book. So Ges' story in a nutshell, but he can tell you about it. But 25 years in banking, about another 10 years in smaller businesses, several redundancies. And when most people I know are starting to slow down, Ges then figures out the love of his career and creates his own public speaking training consultancy, which is booming. So you are a brilliant example, and I loved having you in my book.
Oh, thank you. And to use your analogy of motorbiking, interesting, in my days of working, and it was the job that I resigned for, my definition of freedom was motorbiking on the A3 up to the city. That was the heights of escape for me. But to motorbike around Europe, brilliant, Lucia. Thank you. So if anyone in our lunch guests today knows someone else who's feeling absolutely stuck in their career and wants to find out more about you and your methods, which just sound brilliant, where should they go?
I called my business Midlife Unstuck. So midlifeunstuck.com is the best place to find out about me, but I'm also on LinkedIn. Thanks, Ges.
Thank you. Then let's all, apart from anything else, let's all link up with Lucia on LinkedIn, and let's pass our friends and our colleagues who we know are either stuck now or are pretty soon going to be towards Lucia for some help. Lucia, thank you very much for your conversation today.
Thank you.